Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to this month's webinar, The Magical Force of Major Gifts Donors. My name is Pearl Hoagland, and I am the Senior Program Manager for the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, a couple notes. This webinar will be conversational with the opportunity to ask questions during the webinar, as well as a Q&A following the presentation. Please submit any questions you have in the questions box on your GoToWebinar control panel. In the days following the webinar, you will receive an email with the slide deck and recording to review again at your leisure. You've got a cause, learn how to fund it. At the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, we enhance fundraisers' skills so they can develop and sustain donor relationships to advance their cause in today's growing giving landscape through a proven contemporary curriculum. Presented by world-class nonprofit leaders, best-in-class faculty, and renowned philanthropists. We want to take a moment to recognize our important affiliate partners who provide training and education to fundraisers nationally. Check out the map to find an institute in your community. If you are on social media, please give us a shout out using the hashtag SIPwebinar and tag us. Now, I am very pleased to introduce today's presenter, Kristen Romaine, trainer for Sanford Programs. Kristen believes that saving our Earth is the most urgent philanthropic and humanitarian effort of our time. Currently serving as development director at Virtue Lab, a clean tech acceleration program for early stage startups in the Pacific Northwest, she is implementing philanthropic models to provide innovation funding for climate change solutions. Kristen has been a Sanford National Trainer for 2 years and was the lead facilitator for the launch of the Sanford Fundraising Academy at Maricopa Community College District in Arizona. Kristen brings an extensive background in fundraising and development of large-scale campaigns and has raised over $75 million for local and global organizations during her career. She uses relationship-based fundraising approaches and design thinking in her fundraising and community building facilitation practices. Kristen is a member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals and received her MBA in Nonprofit Management from Regis University in 2003. Originally from Phoenix, Arizona, in 2012, she was named 40 Under 40 by the Phoenix Business Journal and is a graduate of the Valley Leadership Program. Kristen and her family, Terrence, James, and her rescue dog Bear, are proud to call Portland, Oregon home and are on a family mission to scatter joy. Welcome, Kristen, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Pearl. I'm excited to be here, and major gift donors is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think it can be one of the most intimidating aspects of fundraising, and so I'm excited to give you all some really great tools for your toolbox today. So here's some of our objectives. The first is that we want to identify the importance and magic of major gift donors to your organizational health. We also want to evaluate your current major gifts program based on the key metrics to donor success. So if you don't have a current major gifts program that's formalized, that's okay. You can still look at these metrics and be able to look at what should you be measuring going forward in the future. And finally, I want you to set up a 3-step strategy for your major gifts program. And I'm going to review some of the things that you could potentially do for this at the end of the presentation. But my goal is that you each identify 3 things that you can do to basically get your major gifts running and going. And this is a great time of year to do that because major gift donors are thinking about their year-end giving. A lot of them are starting to realize if they have excess with their accountants. And so this is a good time to go to them and to be able to start discussing and building a relationship to give to your organization and for your mission. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is donor gift distribution. So this is where strategy really comes into major gift donors. So this is just some of the trends nationally. This is the report by Giving USA. And as you can see,
Hi, Kristen. It seems we have lost audio for a moment. What I will do while we're fixing the audio is we are going to start with a poll. This is Pearl Hoagland. We are going to start with a poll. You'll see the poll question up there. The question is, what % of your organization's budget is made up of major gift donations? We're going to give about 20 seconds. The poll should be on your screen. Kristen, I think we have your audio back.
Okay.
All right. So what we're going to do after the polls, we're just going to go back one slide and we'll hear all the amazing things you have to say, and then we'll keep going. About 5 more seconds to finish the poll. All right, let's take a look at the results. Kristen, do you see them on your screen? Let's see. It looks like we have, let's see what the results are. We have 27% said 0 to 10%. 24% said 11 to 25%. 27%, 26 to 75%. Other, there were about 4% of respondents, and then I don't know, that was about 18% of respondents. All right, folks, sorry, hang tight. We just had a bit of an audio issue. We're fixing it now, and we'll be with you in just a sec. Kristen, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right. So we looked at the poll results, and we can, hi. So we can head back now and look at the slide right before.
Okay.
Okay.
And great.
This one here?
This one here?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the Giving USA information on why Americans give. And this shows that majority of your giving should be coming from individuals, and the majority of those individuals typically end up your major gift donors.
So that's really important for us to think about and to basically look at. So that's why we wanted to know where your major gift numbers are at as far as the percentages. So I'm going to skip past this.
And most of you had fairly healthy organizations. It looks like majority of you are, at least at 10%, which means you're probably growing your major gifts program. Some of you were even closer to that 75, which is better. Typically, about if you're a really mature, healthy organization, 90% of your budget is going to come from 10% of your donors. So that's really
hard
to get to when you're first starting out, but you need to know that so that you know that that's the end goal. So this next slide is just what you want to do is take your budget as you are right now, put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and look at where your gift's coming from right now to determine, are you in an unbalanced gift proportion perspective. And this particular one is typically how most young organizations start off. You get most of your funding from grants and foundations. But it may be another area of giving that you're a little unbalanced. And so I call this graph, when you put it into a pie chart, if it looks like this and it has any sort of resemblance of Pac-Man, then I tell people you kind of have a Pac-Man problem, which means that you need to start differentiating the funds coming into your organization to be more sustainable and more balanced. And one of the best ways and most sustainable ways to do that is through major gift donors. So let's talk about what are some of the major gifts magic and ways that you can develop those major gift relationships. So step one is to really know how many major gift donors that you need. And again, this is where fundraising comes into a little bit of strategy. There's some strategy before you start building those relationships. So what I do is I start with a gift chart, and you have to determine what is a major gift. So I've worked up this example one. It's a $4 million goal. And this is just a gift chart which breaks down what are the gift ranges that you need, how many gifts do you need, what are the number of prospects you need in order to reach that total. And as you can see on here, that means that for major gifts, which is kind of this red or orange level zone, I need 25 gifts, which means I need about 100 prospects. And so what you would do is you would go through and analyze the prospects that you have and determine how many do you think are actually capable or have the capacity to give at those levels. And if you don't have people currently at those levels, that's where you want to start looking for who potentially can I be out there talking to. And so a lot of times we get focused on the gifts coming in as a long-term and large building, fundraiser that's done massive campaigns. I'm always most prioritized on how many qualified prospects do I have, because I know if I have enough qualified prospects at the various giving levels, that then it's just called working the numbers, and then it's just making those requests and getting those visits. If you want to work something like this up, Blackbaud actually has a really great gift calculator, and that's usually what I start with to start breaking down this list. And you can type in whatever your goal amount is. So if your budget is $150,000, or if it's $1 million, you can put those amounts in. I also use it for things like giving days to break down my giving goals for giving days. So it's a really great tool. So let's talk about what your major gifts should be given on your budget size. So this is some breakdown of what organizations of various budget size qualified as a major gift. And so you can see that organizations that had less than $300,000 in their budget, they typically were referring to like a $1,000 gift as a major gift. And you can see the numbers going up. The thing I like to tell people is that if you are a smaller organization that's starting to grow, you want to be really careful with what you use as major gift terminology, especially if you're using it in a public or front-facing sort of way, because you don't want to qualify $5,000 as a major gift and then 3 years down the line realize, well, actually $25,000 should really be the start of my major gift zone. So you can use these numbers to kind of give you an idea. Like if you're between 1 million and 2 million, then having $2,500 to $5,000 be something that qualifies, 2,500 or more qualifies as a major gift. That would be absolutely a normal thing to do. So here's some of the most common major gift sizes. So 1 to 2,500 or 2,499 is the most repeated size. And then you can see across the board of what people are really getting as major gift donations. So step 2 in major gifts magic. This is having really meaningful visits. And I always like to call them visits because really there's only going to be one visit that you're going to qualify as your actual ask. The rest of the time you're doing visits and you're doing relationship building. The other reason I use the term visits is because you need to be thinking about them as conversations and about you learning about the donor. And 85% of success with major gift asks is actually just getting the visit. So this really helped me as a new fundraiser. That's when I first started out in major gift asking, because I was so nervous, because for some reason when you start thinking about that you're asking for more money, the amount of anxiety raises, and you think it's an entirely different process, even though it's the same sort of thing. So it's really important to know that you're 85% there if they even take the visit. So if you've qualified that donor, if you've made sure that they're interested in your mission, that they maybe have given gifts to other organizations similar to yours, and you've built that relationship, then just getting the visit is really what's going to get you off the ground as far as having a successful ask. So here's what a meaningful visit structure looks like. The first is obvious, to be thoughtful and be on time, and to make sure that the location is thoughtful. So sometimes we set appointments with people at coffee shops and things like that, and that can be really dangerous because if it's loud or if the person has any sort of hearing issues, then you run into a situation where you can't have a meaningful conversation. So really thinking about where is this donor going to be most comfortable for us to have a meaningful conversation. The next thing is to never do an ask on the first visit. And a lot of new fundraisers make this mistake because they see that someone has capacity, they see that they've given money to another organization similar to theirs, and so they get an appointment, they get excited, and they end up asking for money on the first visit. And you should just never do that. The first few visits should really be about you getting to know the donor and finding out how their values align with your mission. The third thing is to always include the significant other if you are making an ask. So this is a mistake I made many times early on in my career. Most major gift donors have more sophisticated philanthropy ideas and plans than you would realize, and it's something that if they are in a significant relationship, they decide those things with their significant other. So if you wait to bring that other person in too late into the conversation, sometimes you're missing really valuable aspects that could lead to potentially a higher level gift. And there's some really great case study stories of this, particularly in academic and higher education fundraising, where they didn't involve the wife, and all of a sudden, like once they did, they ended up having a much more valuable and meaningful conversation with the couple. Finally, it's to ask questions and only do 15% of the talking. And this is really hard for us as fundraisers, and especially if we're really passionate about our mission, because we want to go sit there and we want to tell them all the wonderful things about our organization. But you should really go to those meetings with a list of questions of what you're trying to learn about that donor, what you're trying to learn about how they want to give, and what sort of meaningful connections they can have with your organization. And finally, you want to understand what you need to learn from the visit. So rather than thinking about the outcome as making an ask, really thinking about what is it that I want to learn from this individual during our time together. So here's what the framework looks like. The first thing, and I always make a Google Doc of these, and I send it out as framework before a meeting to both my executive director and anyone else who's going to be at the meeting. So I let people know who's going to be at the meeting, where is the meeting going to take place, and then we set the tone. And by setting the tone, what we do is we think about, how do we want to show up as an organization? What's the feeling that we want them to have after our visit? And here's some of the things that I think about. I want them to always, if you're building a culture of philanthropy, you want to start with gratitude. You want them to feel like you're grateful that they're willing to be an advocate for your organization, or even willing to be interested in what you're talking about, to give you advice, whatever the context is, but really being grateful that they're willing to take the time out. The second thing is you really want them to know that you're knowledgeable and credible about the mission and the area that you serve. So being able to have them understand your track record, or what you're doing well, or your impacts, things like that, is really important to people. They want to know, and they want to be on like a winning train going forward. Finally, you want them to know that you're innovative. So a lot of major gift donors right now are looking for new, interesting ways to do their philanthropy. And so letting them know how you're doing things that are innovative or different, or what is your differentiating factors of your organization. Those things are really important to be able to share. You don't necessarily have to have talking points on these things, but I've found by just writing them down in my framework plan, it allows me to keep those things in mind and to think about things that I want to share with that particular donor. Finally, you want to let them know that you're open to exploring. So a lot of times major gift donors will come to meetings and they will have new things they want to do with their philanthropy. And so having them feel like you're open to exploring ideas and creating something that's custom for them is really important for the relationship. Then you want to think about how you want them to feel. Because giving to an organization is definitely an emotional decision and a value-based decision. So what you want to think about is how can you make them feel inspired by your work and vision? How can you make them feel like they're in the know and that they are kind of part of something that's really special? And then we want to talk about what is our story. So what are we doing that connects with their values, and share your story also with data. So make sure that it's not just all the touchy-feely qualitative information, but make sure that you're also sharing some data so that you're covering multiple thinking methods. And then here's the big three, and these are the things I always make sure that my executive director and I've talked about before a meeting. We talk about what we want them to learn from us. So if there's any sort of new initiatives that we have or anything that we really want to share with them, if we've received an award or if we've received other funding that's going to maximize their previous funding, you know, those are things that we want to know and be able to share and have them learn from us. Then you want to think about what do we want to learn from them. So sometimes an example of something you might want to learn from a major gift donor is what are their philanthropic priorities and when do they set those plans? So do they think about those things once a year? When is a good time to approach them with something new? And most major gift donors have pretty sophisticated plans of how they're doing their major gift philanthropy. And so it's really good to kind of understand how they make those decisions. And most of them are pretty open. If you ask them, you know, if you say, we're interested in potentially talking with you about supporting some of our programs, and we'd love to understand how your family is prioritizing your philanthropy, and really when would be the best time for us to start that discussion given how you make your fundraising or your philanthropic decisions. And then finally, what is your ask of them? So even if you aren't making a financial ask in this particular visit, it's always important to make some sort of ask that's easy enough that they can get their foot in the boat. So you want them to get you want them to feel like they're part of your organization by the end of that meeting. So that's the term we use, is how do we get their foot in the boat, or how do we get their step on the journey? And that's really a good way to think about what's something that you can get them to say yes to before the end of that meeting. One of the things that we use is asking them who else we should be talking to. And this really helps if you don't have a lot of major gift donors on your prospect list, because you can leave every visit with 1 or 2 additional names and potentially even warm introductions from that individual to a few more people that you can be speaking with. So that's a really great thing to ask right off the bat is, you know, who else do you think, based on what we've talked with you about, that we should be talking to? And usually they will have a couple of names to pass along. Finally, think about the goals. Again, get them to say yes about something. The goal is to really build the relationship. So it's to make that connection and to make them feel, you know, humans are wired for connection. So making sure that you're making them feel like they're building a relationship with not only you, but the organization as a whole. And then finally, what can we do for them? So a lot of times we leave visits and it's really, we're all about us. But some of the most meaningful conversations that I've had with major gift donors has been when I've asked them, what can I do for you? And sometimes it's really interesting what they'll come up with as far as areas that they're trying to explore related to their philanthropy. Sometimes it's just maybe they want connections that they know your organization has, and making some of those introductions for them can help you build the relationship. I've even had donors who have asked me for other organizations that fall in different sectors of nonprofit, and they've asked for recommendations. And so once you start becoming that person that the donor trusts to come to for information like that, your relationship with them is on a whole nother level. So really start to think about what can you do for them. It's not only about what they can do, what they can do for us as organizations. So here's step 3 in Major Gifts Magic, which is meaningful relationships. And I like to talk to people about the rule of digits. So if you're going to ask someone for a 6-digit gift, which, you know, in this case, I'm using an example of $100,000. If you count the number of digits in that, so this 100,000 is 6 digits, that means in general, it's not a hard and fast rule, but in general, I would try to put in my mind having at least 6 meaningful visits with this donor before I ever make an ask. What that does is it allows you to build the relationship to a point where they know you're a fundraiser. They know that that is your job. They know that eventually that's what's coming. And if they continue to accept the visits from you and you continue to build that relationship, then by the time you get to the point where you have the number of digits that you're asking for the amount of money, typically the donor is primed and the donor is already ready to make a gift. And a lot of times they will even do what I call donor signaling. So you'll be in a visit with them and they will start telling you that they're interested in giving to your organization. And sometimes they'll even provide you with information about potentially how much to ask and what they would be interested in supporting. So a lot of times by the time you get to that digit, the donor's already ready. They already know it's coming. And so it really makes it where once I start to see a donor signaling to me quite a bit, I get really excited, because then I know that, again, going back to the 85% rule, if I'm getting the visits, that's the most important part, and in building the relationship. So before we go into this community share, I just want to check in and see if you have any questions at this point, if you want to throw them in the question box, and then we'll make sure that Pearl reads off those questions to me. But this next thing I want to do is kind of a community share. So what do you need to know about a donor before you go in to make an ask? And then if you were to think about what are some of the need to knows, like what would be some things that you would need to know about a donor before you would feel comfortable or know that they aligned with your mission. So I'll just give you a few minutes to share those things in the chat or in the questions box.
Hi, Kristen. All right. Yep, we're going to give a few seconds for some more to come in. We already have some rolling in, so I'll just get started. Some of the need to knows, other organizations they give to, their propensity to give overall, so how philanthropic they are. Let's see what other ones are coming in. Oh, their relationship status. So if they're single, in a relationship, and then just looking to see what else comes in. Another one similar to relationship status, who has the decision-making power? Here we go. There's some more coming in. How long they have been partnering with your organization, work history, political affiliation. Oh, this is a good one. How do they want to be asked? Okay, let's see. Is that a good list so far, Kristen?
Yeah, that's great. I think those are all really great examples. And I think some of them that I heard, you know, like the ones I really think about are capacity, what's their commitment to this particular cause, what sort of connections do they have and that they would want with your organization, as well as connections to others within the community. So those are really, really great things. I use sometimes the life, if you do life coaching, they have this like blank wheel, and sometimes I use that, and I will just fill in how much I know about a donor, and it's just a good quality check to make sure that you know enough about a donor that you really feel like you're qualified to go in with a major gift ask. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into what some of the metrics are for major gifts. And again, if you don't have a formalized major gift program, that's okay. But this is actually how you can start to build one, is start by working backwards and looking at, well, what would be the best practices, and kind of work backwards. And some of this came from masteringmajorgifts.com, and they have some great resources there. So the first thing you're going to want to start measuring is, what is your retention, both in numbers and the percentage of donors that you keep. Unfortunately, in our sector, the national retention rate of donors is 45%. I personally think this is because we don't do enough donor stewardship, and that's why that's something I've always very much prioritized in my fundraising programs. But this is something for you to really think about, because it costs the organization a lot of money if you're constantly in finding new donors mode, and especially with major gift donors, because there aren't going to be as many major gift donors out there as there are other types of donors. So it's really important that you're thinking about, how do I retain this donor? The dollars requested and received. So you want this to be greater than 25%. Again, that's the 1-to-4 ratio. So if you went back to your gift chart, for every one gift, I had 4 prospects. If you start to fall below a 1 in 4 as you're making your visits, it's time to really relook at what your pitch is and what your ask looks like, and your relationship building, because there's a problem. Because normally, statistically, for every 4 visits you go on, you should leave with a gift, at least one. And so it doesn't mean you're going to leave with the gift amount that you wanted to ask for, but you should at least leave with a gift. So this is really important to look at. The third thing is meaningful visits, and this is the one that I really encourage all of you to take action on, like tomorrow. It's really hard as a fundraiser to have others in the organization understand that if you're not out actually having these visits and having these fundraising meetings, that the money isn't going to come in. And a lot of times we get pulled on to do a lot of other things within the organization related to marketing, related to, this is the many hats problem that we have in the nonprofit sector. But one of the things I always really prioritize, particularly if I'm in a development director role, or if I'm in a major gifts officer type role, I always let the executive director, the board, everyone know. I repeat it over and over and over again, going back to this chart and the number of gifts and number of prospects, and then the number of visits I need to have. So I have my visits broken down into how many visits I need to have per week, how many visits my executive director needs to have per week in order for us to meet goal. And then if I get pulled away from those things, I'm very clear and let people know, well, this means I'm going to have to double up on visits next week. And I'm constantly talking about number of visits, because you aren't going to bring in the money if you aren't prioritizing those visits. And so making sure that you have those things blocked out on your calendar. Some people I know have really used this with their time blocking schedule and actually set certain days of the week so that everyone on their team knows that those are the days they're out visiting with donors. But you should be going on 12 to 52 major gift visits per year, which is at least 1 per week. So if you're not doing that, I would start doing that now. And you can start doing that with previous donors. It doesn't need to be new donors. It can be other donors that you have in your system. And the last thing is stewardship. So this is how you build the retention. You should thank a donor 7 times, 7 different ways. One of those ways can be your donor receipt that sometimes gets auto-generated when they make their gift, and once it's entered into your CRM. But otherwise, you should be thinking about creative ways to thank that donor. And as you build that relationship with them, it becomes a lot easier because you start to learn about their personal interests. So this is really fun, and it doesn't have to be things that cost money. I've done some really great things with our capital campaigns where I've even sent just text messages with pictures of things as things were built into the building. I would sneak in with the hard hat and get, you know, some pictures and send those to people. That's part of stewardship. It's making them feel like they're on the inside loop, and that they really have meaning to your organization throughout the year. It can also be sharing with them if you had any sort of big win. So making sure, I always make sure before a press release goes out about a major gift that's come in or a grant or anything like that, I kind of have a VIP list of people that I make sure I'm going to let them know this first, because I don't want them to read it in the paper. I want them to hear it from me. So those are ways that you can really make your major gift donors feel happy. So in the 2018 fundraising effectiveness survey report, it showed some different growths in giving. So one was giving was up 2%. The other was, you know, this overall donor retention rate, which I think is still horrible at 45. Again, that's if you're not, there's so many organizations that don't even thank donors for their gift, which I really don't think, if you're not able to steward a donor, you shouldn't be asking them and taking their money. So it's really important that you are thanking them. And then growth in donors was really only 0.7%. What this tells me is that nonprofits, you know, if you're not showing a growth in donors, it means that you're not really prioritizing building relationships. Because again, if you're making a donor happy, they're going to bring along their friends and family and others they know and make introductions. And so the stronger you build those relationships, the more you're going to have this growth in donors, particularly among major gift donors.
Hi, Kristen, we just have a question for clarification.
Yes.
The retention rate, is that all donors or just major gifts donors?
I believe on that report, it's all donors. I don't know that they've broken it out. It's hard for them to break out into major gift donors because every organization defines major gift donors differently. Major gift donors should be a higher percentage in most organizations, but unfortunately, I don't think it is. I think a lot of the major gift donors I've spoken to, they feel like once they make that large gift, they just don't hear from the organization again until they need more money. And that's really unfortunate because they should be the people that, you know, that means they're basically investing in you as an organization. And if you were a startup and you had an investor, you know, you definitely wouldn't take that money and then never speak to them again. You would be telling them all about your success. So it's important that we do that. So here's the 3 truths about donor loyalty. The first is that organizations are not entitled to donor loyalty. It's a process of continually re-earning it. So this happens a lot with major gift donors. We think that because they've given to us for years and years and years that they're just kind of going to keep doing it. And that's not always the case. And so it's important that we're continually building that relationship. I've seen a lot of organizations lose major gift donors because they didn't cultivate the relationship well, and the donor decided to take their money and put it towards something else. Donor loyalty, this says it's not magic, meaning that it is a hard, it's the result of hard work and preparation, and that's where this statistical stuff comes in. If you do the statistical stuff, then it does become magical, because once you start working those numbers, and especially if you've cultivated and really curated those donors, you're going to have really great success. But without that statistical preparation and the number crunching, you can't just magically think, oh, okay, I need to just talk to everyone who has capacity about my organization, because that's not going to work. But if you take the time to do the preparation, you'll be really successful. And then finally, you don't wait for the right time to cultivate donor loyalty. You do it all the time. So this is something, if you have a CRM system, or you can even do it using tools and things on Gmail and stuff like that, if your organization isn't quite to the point where you have a CRM. One of the things that I do is I really set check-ins for all my major gift donors. And so once I receive a gift, I automatically schedule out into my Google Calendar the 7 different check-in dates. And what that does is just allows it to pop up as a reminder and let me know, oh, okay, I need to check in with this donor. Then as you get more sophisticated in building out your program, you can eventually get to a point where you have a donor loyalty or donor stewardship day where your entire team spends that day, goes through a list of who we haven't checked in with for a while, and you can kind of break it up amongst your team. But it's something you should be doing all the time. And again, you shouldn't ask for that gift until you've thanked the donor 7 times, 7 different ways for the previous gift. So the AFP Fundraising Effectiveness Project also said that 95% of donors would appreciate a thank you call within 1 to 2 days of donation receipt. I have a really great story about this. There's actually an organization in Arizona that I gave to because I attended a dinner with a friend of mine. It really wasn't, it's not that I wasn't in support of their mission, but it wasn't one of the philanthropic areas that my family had identified as being a high priority. But they did such a great job with their stewardship and their thanking of me for that gift that I continue to give to them. There's other organizations that were part of my mission philanthropy priority that I have actually given more money to, and I don't get as much of that cultivation or stewardship. And it's hard for me as a fundraiser because I want to call the fundraiser at these organizations and say, are you looking at my job title? Like, I'm a fundraiser. You should probably make sure like you're stewarding me because I know what stewarding is. But this is where I think that a lot of organizations really miss the ball. So thanking them, again, it doesn't have to be you yourself. This could be volunteers. It could be clients of the organization. There's some really fun ways that you can do this, but it is so surprising if you, especially if you make a gift of a low dollar amount and they actually call you to thank you for it and have a really like fun, thankful script. It really changes the game and it makes you want to give more. The second thing said, 85% said that a thank you would influence them to give again. Again, I've continued to give to this organization that honestly I would have given to once because I attended their dinner, and instead I've just continued to give to them, and it's mostly because I love how well they do donor stewardship. 84% that they would give a larger gift, and a 10% increase in donor retention can increase the net donations by 200% over the lifetime of an organization. So this is one of the best ways that you can build sustainability within your organization. And I encourage you all to really share these numbers with your higher ups or your executive directors, because if they say, well, I don't want you spending all this time thanking donors, I need you out there asking donors, it's a really great way to let them know, hey, this should still be a huge priority for us. So here's how we beat the odds. Donors give more as the result of long-term relationships with organizations. You need to find ways to meet the donors' growing expectations and to increase their level of engagement. Now, some of this, some major gift donors have told me, like, it's kind of annoying if they make a gift and all of a sudden, like, the fundraiser wants to like take them to lunch and like do all this stuff, and sometimes that's not their style. So understanding, and really you can even be clear once they give you the gift, you can say, we really want to make sure that we provide you with the engagement with our organization that you want. What does that look like for you? And sometimes they'll tell you, like, I really like to receive a newsletter, or I really just want updates when you're doing well, or whatever they say. But it's really important that you're mainly just making sure that you're keeping them engaged with the organization. You also want to focus on fast acting cultivation. So what this means is, you've probably heard the term like low hanging fruit, things like that. You want to look at your gift chart and you want to look at who are the donors that I can get to move the quickest. And sometimes that is based on how deep of your relationship you have with them. So in my CRM, we've prioritized all of the donors using what we think their relationship strength with us is as an organization. It's a totally subjective rating. It's not based on any sort of fancy algorithms. It's literally us going through and saying, yeah, we feel like this is like a stage 2. And then that way, if we want to sort and decide, okay, who do we need to be talking to, we're able to look at who all those phase people are at once. So having a bonding window for a first-time donor also is within the first 1 to 3 months of a gift. So making sure that you're not waiting until it's been 6 months is really important. So here's the 3 keys to donor retention. The first thing is to think like a donor. The second thing is to say thank you like you mean it. And the third thing is to treat everyone like a major gift donor. There's nothing worse than if you treat major gift donors like they are super VIPs and you treat everyone else, and not that you're treating them horribly, but you don't want to have like caste systems to your donors. So the first thing I want to talk about is thinking like a donor. And one of the ways that we can think about this is a concept that's called sitting in the seat of a donor. And I was very fortunate early in my career to have a donor who actually helped describe this to me. And what he did was he sat in the chair across from me and he literally pretended to be these different donor women that I was going to potentially be speaking with. And it was hilarious because he was really like, you know, using voices and like their hand gestures and the whole thing. But what he was trying to get across to me is that you have to get into the seat and you have to start thinking what's important to that donor, and therefore what do they want to hear from me, what sort of programs do we have that they would be most interested in, and then using disc profiles and things like that, which I know Sanford covers is in the Fundraising Academy. Really being able to understand, are they a logical thinker, are they more of a relational thinker, so that you can really present to them using their style as well. The next thing is to lead with gratitude. So we always start everything with thank you. And that's really how you start a culture of philanthropy. My first fundraising plan with major gift donors was literally, my mentor told me, go out, start meeting with people, and then write 5 thank you notes a day. And so literally every single day I was thinking about who am I grateful for, who supported me as an organization. And that literally led me to so many other connections. So make sure that you're really leading with gratitude and saying thank you. And then treating everyone like a major gift donor, because this is really important right now because we have a lot of what we call millionaires next door, particularly with all of the tech startups and money that has come into play there. You do not know who has the capacity to be a major gift donor. And with some of these tech startups and the developers that work there, a lot of them do not yet have philanthropy decisions made or a nonprofit of choice. And so you have a lot of opportunity there. So we're going to be sharing this deck with you, but these are some of the things that you can think about as far as philanthropy of the future. It's really about more face-to-face contact. With social media and things like that, people were really missing that human connection. So if you can make it kind of feel more old school with face-to-face contact, it's really helpful. Make sure you're reaching out outside of times when you need a financial request. Make stewardship calls rather than solicitation calls, you know, checking in with people. Educate the board regularly on the cause and make sure they're up to speed on what your programs are. And then inviting major gift donors to share why they made their gifts. This is really great for your year-end giving appeal. If you can get someone who's already made a major gift to your organization to sort of vouch for you and say why you're one of their nonprofits of choice, it's really helpful. You can track contributor retention, like we said, ask leaders to occasionally thank donors. So usually there's a set number where if it's over a certain dollar amount, your executive director should always make a thank you call or a personal thank you. And then again, handwritten note, make sure you're using the power of social media. Make sure you're encouraging younger people to be on your committees and you're thanking younger gift donors, because most younger gift donors are not being stewarded at all, and we really need to do that. And then making sure donors see the ROI. So these are other things that you'll get in the final deck. And this all relates back to the cause selling cycle, which is part of the Sanford program. So if you've taken any of the other webinars or any of the other courses or workshops at Sanford, you know that this is really the solidifying factor to our program. And I've actually built these phases into my CRM system, and my entire team is trained on knowing what stage we're at with various donors. And it's really, really helpful, and it really works. I encourage you to really dive into and think about where you're at with certain donors on the cycle. So that's all I have. I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Pearl so we can do some questions, and we'll take it from there.
All right, thanks, Kristen. I'm going to just get started with the first question. If sending a thank you, can a text count as a phone call?
I think it depends on the donor, and you'll know the donors well enough. I would say if you have a really solid relationship with that donor, it does. But I would also try to work phone calls in if it's something you think that donor enjoys. There's so many people right now that are just anti phone calls, and so knowing who those people are, I think, is important. But yeah, I think a text is more personal, and it's worked really well for me with some of our major gift donors.
Great. All right, a question we received earlier: what do you discuss in the 3 to 6 visits?
Yeah, so usually I have a list of questions that I'm wanting to find out from the donor. Sometimes those visits can be giving them tours. I had a really great conversation with a woman who was running a zoo, and she was telling me that her first year in the role, she took major gift donors that had been part of the zoo program for a long time. She took them on almost like reverse tours, where she had them walk through the zoo and tell her the things that they loved about it. And I thought that was so incredible because, you know, she was new to the organization, and had she stood there and tried to tell these major gift donors who had contributed for years and years and years and probably knew more about the zoo than she did, if she tried to be the expert to them, it was going to come across inauthentic. And I thought that was a really great way. So you can do reverse tours. Sometimes I like to do things that show an interest in what they're interested in. So I've had major gift donors that sometimes we would go and take a walk through the art museum and have like a walking meeting. So it's more, really depends on the particular donor, but it's mostly about building the relationship. So if you think about how you would talk to someone that you're trying to build a relationship with, and that sort of context, and the things you're trying to learn about them, those are the same things you want to know from a major gift donor.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question. I believe we have time for one more question, maybe another quick question after that. What are recommendations to build a prospective major gifts donor list?
Yeah, so I'm glad someone asked this because I think it's pretty common. There's probably a bunch of people on this call or webinar today that you don't have a major gift list, and you don't have previous donor lists to work from. The best thing to do if you're in that scenario, most cities have some sort of high society type magazines. You typically find them like at your Whole Foods or your high-end grocery stores. But really starting to follow those magazines, look at who's attending what events, looking at other organizations' donor lists. And some people in fundraising consider this you know, stealing or poaching donors or whatever. But really, if you think about it, if a donor is interested in a particular sector or category, the chances are that it's not going to pull funds away from an organization that's built a really strong relationship with them if another organization starts talking to them. So I always look at who's given to similar organizations. You can do that either through other organizations like annual giving lists or their annual reports. Or sometimes I use like Foundation Center, Candid. You can use that to look at other organizations who they've received grants from and things like that. And sometimes that lets you know some of the major gift donors who have family foundations that might be interested in giving to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kristen. Kristen, if you could give one key takeaway following this webinar, what would it be?
I would say make sure you're focused on the number of visits that you're going on every single week. You need to know what the number of major gift visits are that you need to be on to hit your goals, and really making sure that you are communicating that to everyone around you and saying, I need to be on 2 visits a week, and make sure you're prioritizing that in your time, because you are going to get pulled away with so many other things, and that's where you're going to build the best relationships to win.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Thank you so much for this webinar. What a great conversation. Thank you to everyone who participated. If you would like to contact Kristen, you're going to see her contact info pop up on your screen in just a moment. You will also receive this in an email with the slide deck and recording in the next few days. So thank you again, Kristen. For everyone on the webinar, have we left you wanting more? The second edition of Cause Selling, a guide to relationship-driven fundraising, is available now on Amazon and Kindle. Go to causeselling.org to download a free first chapter and sign up to receive alerts and learn more about our book. Also, we're excited to launch a new webinar series for academic leaders, the Fundraising for Academic Leaders webinar series. You'll receive this info in a follow-up email, and we hope that you register. Thank you again to our audience for your time and participation. To help us continue to improve our monthly webinar series and ensure that we are providing value to our audience, please take a few minutes to complete our survey. We would be very grateful. Otherwise, have a great day, and thank you for all that you do to better the communities in which we live, work, and play. We'll see you on November 21st.